Today we're going to be testing out 3 different tools. Number 1 is Aperture Finance, number 2 is Metrix Finance, and number 3 is Krystal. Ultimately, the goal is to deploy into the same liquidity position, but looking at multiple tools to see which one is going to lead us to the most accurate data. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Aperture Finance is a composable automation tool for Uniswap V3s. So they allow you to execute rebalances as well as create automations on your concentrated liquidity positions for Uniswap, PancakeSwap, and Aerodrome. Now they just recently released a calculator function over here, which is a fork of something known as Uniswap Fish, which used to be a pretty big protocol back in the day. And I'm going to go ahead and pull up Ethereum to USDC on Uniswap Ethereum network on the Aperture calculator. Now currently Aperture only does support Uniswap as well as PancakeSwap. And now that we've pulled that up, we can head over to Metrix Finance and do the exact same thing. We want to pull up Ethereum to USDC over on Uniswap. And just like that, we're going to select the 0.05% fee tier. This is the exact same pool that you're going to see over on Aperture Finance. Aperture Finance does look somewhat similar to Metrix Finance, but we see a lot more information and there's a lot more functionality over here. And now that we have it pulled up on Metrix Finance, we're going to go ahead and head over to Krystal, which used to be a DeFi wallet, but has transitioned into an automated liquidity management software, kind of like Aperture Finance. Now we'll head over to the hot pool section over on Krystal, and it is a little bit trickier to actually find the Ethereum to USDC liquidity pool. We basically just have to select the Ethereum network, we have to select Uniswap V3, and then from here we can look at Ethereum/USDC by just simply searching it, and it will show us all the opportunities. So we're looking at the 0.05% tier as well, so we'll go ahead and pull that one up as well. Once again, it's a similar interface to Metrix Finance, but Metrix Finance still trumps all these other tools when it comes to actual analytics. As you can see on Metrix Finance, you can see how your position performs by token, by value, and by total value. You can also see the volume history, which also showcases the daily fees, and then we can also see the top positions for this pair. Not only that, we will see average APR, we'll see price volatility, TVL, 24-hour average fees, 24-hour average volume, the fee to TVL, and the volume to TVL metric, and even the correlation for this liquidity pair and geometric mean for our range. Now I am personally going to use a range of 2150 to 2900, and looking at the chart, you'll notice that that gives us primarily Ethereum, about 60% Ethereum. Now we're actually going to be deploying $1,000 into this liquidity position. Now before I start even using any other tools, I need to make sure that I'm using metrics efficiently. So the first thing that I notice is the price is right to the left of this peak of liquidity, right? There's a ton of liquidity right to the right of our current price, which means we need to assume that that's what we're going to have on the current price. And we go from an APR of roughly 46% to an APR of roughly 13% just by adjusting the current price, because there's a lot more liquidity on that price. Now additionally, we need to take a look over at the volume history, and you'll notice that it's trending somewhat downwards, and then we have this huge spike where we saw roughly $435 million in volume. It's not really fair to factor that into our analysis because, well, if you look at recent days, we haven't been doing that much volume. So I'm going to go ahead and use a calculation range of 5 days on Metrix Finance, and you'll notice that drops us down to about 11%, and it factors out that super high day of volume and only looks at the consistent data over the past 5 days. Now if we're going to head over to Aperture and do that exact same thing, we do have the functionality to adjust the current price. So we'll just go ahead and copy and paste straight from Metrix Finance. That's at the peak of liquidity now, and you'll notice that we're doing about a 19% APR. And the next thing that we actually need to do is fill out our range, which is 2150 to 2900. And just like that, Aperture is showing that we're getting roughly 15.5%, but I'm personally going to believe that that's not the case. And the main reason why is because we're at that peak of liquidity distribution right here. Now we're going to head over to Krystal and do that exact same thing. We're basically just going to go ahead and plot our range because they do not give us the functionality to adjust the current price. So we'll go ahead and copy 2150 to 2900 right in here. It's automatically going to find the closest tick, and it's simulating that we are expected to earn roughly a 31% APR. So as you can see, we got very different numbers over on Krystal than we do over on Metrix, than we do over on Aperture. So the whole point of this experiment is to deploy $1,000 to see which one is most accurate and is going to be the closest to the actual return that we're going to get. But of course, like any liquidity provider would, we want to make sure that we're actually in the best fee tier as well as best asset class. And what I mean by that is we are looking at Ethereum to USDC on the 0.05% fee tier. What if Ethereum to USDT on 0.05% is better? Or what if Ethereum to USDC on 0.3% is better? We need to make sure that we're looking across different networks as well. So we'll head over to Metrix Finance and we'll go to the pair page. This is something that Metrix Finance has that not any other tool has. We can basically select Uniswap V3, select the networks that Uniswap is on. I'm personally just going to go ahead and select these 5. And we're gonna go ahead and put in Ethereum to USDC. Yes, I am looking at Ethereum to USDC, and the reason why is because Metrix Finance has the functionality to actually go in and look at Ethereum to USDT as long as we allow it to do so by checking that little similar assets button. Now, what I'm also gonna go ahead and do is copy the current price along with our range right into the pair function, and that's going to allow me to see these exact metrics across multiple pairs. And as you can see, just like that, we have Ethereum to USDT, we have Ethereum to USDC, and then once we enter in our range as well as current price, we'll be able to see some more information. And now that we've filled in our parameters, you can see that this one's doing a 48% APR, this one's doing a 46% APR. And if we keep on going down the list, the original one that we are looking at is doing about 11.5% APR. Now, there are quite literally endless opportunities for Ethereum paired with a stablecoin, but I'm going to go ahead and choose Ethereum to USDT and the 0.3% fee tier. The next thing I'm going to go ahead and do is just look at my analysis again. I zoomed out to a 30-day calculation range. I'm going to look at the volume history and say, okay, it looks like it's more consistent since September 7th. So let's go ahead and use a 6-day calculation range. And just like that, that factors in the consistent data. And we're actually showcasing roughly a 50% APR. And if we dive over into Krystal, we want to go ahead and pull up that same exact pool. We'll just have to search Ethereum to USDT. This one is once again on the Ethereum network still, and that is on the 0.3% fee tier. And then we'll go ahead and do the same exact thing over on Aperture where we select Ethereum to USDT. Now, next thing I want to do in order to make this experiment fair is make sure that we're looking at the exact numbers on each platform. So I'm going to hit this little button that says match ticks. That's going to go ahead and find the closest tick to our current price, our min price, and our max price. So our current price is now set at $24.30. We'll go ahead and throw that in over on Aperture. And our min price is $21.56, our max price being roughly $28.92. So we'll throw that information over on Aperture. We'll look over here on Krystal. That information is already pre-filled because they match closest to the current tick. And unfortunately, we are unable to adjust the current price over on Krystal. Additionally, we cannot adjust the calculation range over on Aperture Finance, nor can we do that on Krystal as well. So those parameters are going to have to stay to what they are currently defaulted to. Now, looking over at Aperture, we're showcasing an APR of roughly 61%. Looking over at Metrix Finance, we're showcasing an APR of roughly 51%. And looking over at Krystal, we're showcasing an APR of 40%. So we have 40%, 50%, and 60%. And we are now going to go ahead and deploy $1,000 into this pool and come back in a week's time to see exactly how it's performed. So I got the position all loaded up. I got the min price, the max price, and then I got the actual deposit amounts. All that's left to do is actually approve the assets and then deploy our capital in the pool and wait a week to see how these perform over the course of a week. And just like that, our transaction has been submitted and our capital is now deployed into this liquidity pool. We have just over $1,000 and we are going to see whether we're going to get 40% APR, 50% APR, or 60% APR. Let's go. Now, while it might have only been a few seconds since you last saw me, it's actually been a week since I've checked up on this position, and lo and behold, it's doing roughly a 53.3% APR. Now, it's currently September 20th, nearly September 21st, but you'll notice that we have about $1,031 in current liquidity, hinting that our assets did appreciate, which you guys can see right over here under the asset gain section. Additionally, we have about $12 of earnings, which obviously isn't a lot, but this was a $1,000 test position. And when you divide that $12 in earnings by the time that we've been deployed in the position, and then you find how much that comes out to annualized and create an APR out of that, that's where this 53.3% APR comes in. Now, a couple other things that I want to note is we did start with 61% ETH and 40% USDT. We now have 41% ETH and 59% USDT, hinting that ETH did outperform USDT and do better than USDT basically. The other thing that I want to go ahead and note is that we have a little bit more USDT from fees. And when I say a little bit more, I mean we have 51% USDT in fees, 49% ETH in fees. That tells us that a little bit more USDT was swapped for ETH as opposed to ETH being swapped for USDT. Now, I haven't claimed any of those earnings quite yet because it's literally only $12 and this was just a test position. When we take a look at the divergence loss metrics, you'll notice that we would have had $1,038 if we just held our initial assets, but we have $1,031 in the liquidity pool because of the shifting out of Ethereum into USDT. That creates $7 of divergence loss, which is $4.84 after HODL. Now, if we were to compare it to us just holding 50-50 at time of deployment, we would only have 85 cents of divergence loss and we'd be at a $11 profit compared to HODL. If we were to put all our money in USDT, well, obviously we would just stuck with the amount that we deployed, $1,002, and we have a $40 profit against that metric. But since ETH did go up in price, you'll notice that hodling 100% ETH would have been the play here. We would have had $1,062. Compared to that metric, we have $30 of divergence loss, which is -18 compared to HODL, which means we lost compared to HODL. That's when we factor in those earnings as well as divergence loss. Looking over at the price range of this position, our average starting price was roughly $24.30, and currently Ethereum is at roughly $25.65. So once again, we did see a little bit of growth for Ethereum. And as you can see, our deployment was was roughly a week ago with $1,003. Now I want to talk about why this return lines up with exactly what we simulated over on Metrix. The first thing that we did was we analyzed the liquidity distribution to see where other liquidity providers were placing their capital. We saw where there was more capital as well as less capital, and we assumed that the price was going to revert to where there was a little bit more capital. So that was one thing, right? We were at the peak of liquidity distribution for the range. The second thing was, instead of using a 30-day calculation range for volume history and factoring in days like this, and so on and so forth, basically, we really only zoned into this data right over here when estimating our return, which means this right here was consistent with what we saw over here. If what we saw over here was much higher, it was a little bit higher, which is why we got 53% instead of roughly 50%. But if this right here was much higher, like 2x the amount, well, then obviously that APR that we initially simulated was not going to be accurate. So we were basically using the data that we had, as well as the consistency that we can identify, to estimate potential returns for the future. And as long as it kept up with that consistency and didn't see a huge decline or a huge incline, we were set to continue doing that volume. But regardless of if it's going to keep up with consistency, it does not make sense to factor in days like this, as well as this, and even this if we are doing this over the past week. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this experiment. If you guys did, drop a like, subscribe, notifications turned on, and you know what liquidity pooling software to use now.